Welcome to Babes, Balls, and Brands, the show where we keep it real about sports, NIL, and building brands that win. I'm Janet Moreira, lawyer, brand protector, and unapologetic sports mom. I understand the grind on and off the field, and I want to give you the playbook. Hey everyone, it's Janet Moreira, and we are back with Babes, Balls, and Brands. And today we are talking to one of the most influential voices in athlete mental wellness, Misty Buck. And she is talking about the mental game behind success. She is the founder of Purpose Soul Athletics, a certified mental performance coach, an author, and a motivational speaker. And she helps athletes build confidence and emotional resilience and purpose beyond the game. So Misty has worked with athletes across all levels, from youth to pros, teaching them how to manage pressure, bounce back from setbacks, and stay aligned with who they are at their core. She's been recognized for helping athletes not just play at a high level, but also live at a high level. And so I am really excited to talk to her about what she has going on and how she helps athletes. Misty, welcome to the show.
Oh, Janet, thank you so much. That's an incredible introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to connect with you today and have this conversation. I know it's going to be really great.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's such an important conversation. Before we dive into that, something I always start with is something fun. So what is a bold move that you've made in your career or your life that really paid off?
There's been quite a few. I can say the first one, I'll share a couple. So the first one is actually when I started my first company, which is actually a marketing agency, and I'm still involved with that today. Which I think is going to help with our NIL conversation. That's inevitably going to come up,
Yes.
I'm sure. So, but I started that company. I was at another PR agency here in Miami, and I was 26 years old, and I decided I wanted to work for myself. And so I went out and did it. And I say that, I really learned from the school of hard knocks in that. I did not study business in school, so I don't really recommend going this route. I also did it in January 2008 when the major crash was happening. Great time to go out on your own and start a business, right? Especially in a field that a lot of people tend to step back on when, they tend to cut their marketing budget when things get tough.
Yeah.
So probably not the best, but that was, maybe that the naive but bold sense of mine, mine actually worked out in my favor. So like I said, it's been 18 years. I still have that business. Somehow, it's continuing to grow and thrive and stay steady. And so I'm really proud of that move. And then I think the second one that comes to mind is probably pretty recently. We were talking before we got started. I have an older daughter, but I also have a son that's almost 2 years old. And I had him at 42 years old. And I feel like that a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, kind of, why you have a daughter already? She's older. She's in her 20s. You're starting over. But to me, it's been like the best decision I have made in my life. Like and just fulfills my husband and my myself in a way. Or my daughter did too, but in a different way. Like he serves a different way. And I'm glad I didn't listen to people.
Yeah.
Who talked about age and all that. So it was really funny. So I do one on the young side and then another on the older side, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot more in between, right? That you probably can't think of at the moment. But yeah, I think life is all about, a series of bold moves that, string together and tell the story. But, well, it's really great to have you here. I'm so excited. You've built a brand around helping athletes train their minds as much as their bodies. So what inspired you to start Purpose Soul Athletics?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it always goes back to my life in general, right? And I think when people are thinking about purpose and they're thinking about their path, I think really reflecting on your experiences that have meant things to you and mattered to you can be a really helpful place, and getting curious about that can be a really helpful place for helping you find sort of your purpose or your path. So just really briefly in a nutshell, I grew up around sports. I was a cheerleader, and then my dad was a coach and my brother played. And later I was a coach for cheerleaders. I volunteered for many years at Optimus League, coaching cheerleaders there. We were very successful. And I always remember that being, that was just, it was so fulfilling, Janet. Like, and I was so young when I did it. I was like in high school and early college years doing that. And it was just incredibly fulfilling because I always, as I reflected on it later in life, I wasn't really just coaching them necessarily on being a cheerleader in the sport of that, although that was a big part of it. So much about mindset came up into that I didn't even realize that I was doing until much later when I was sort of thinking about these things. So also during those years, I began to suffer from mental illness. I suffered from a very serious battle with depression when I was in high school. And then later with anxiety into college and into my later years, right? So those are things that have kind of resurfaced in my life a few times, actually. But I started my marketing agency. I told you guys that. And it's been great. But then there was a point where I thought, man, I really miss helping people from the inside out, like making that deep connection. I literally have never been as fulfilled as I was when I was coaching these cheerleaders. So, and then I'm going to get certified as a life coach. So I went and started there. And then everyone's asking me, hey, who do you want to work with? Who do you want to help? Right? Like this question comes up so much. Like, what's your niche? Who's your target market? Right? Like it's a question that's always there.
Yeah.
And so I went back and forth on a lot of different things. And then finally I was working with a coach myself, and he said to me, well, what are the things that impacted you the most? And I was like, well, I loved coaching, and my mental health journey has been significant for me. It's been a major hurdle that I've overcome again and again. And he's like, so why don't you help athletes with their mental health? And I thought, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So that was around like 2016, 2017, I began blogging about it. And then that kind of started to take off, and then that became a book, and there's been several more books since then. But it's like, it went on that trajectory of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because I understand sort of that mindset of, and I always say that being in that space, that athlete space, was sort of a blessing and a curse when it came to my mental wellness, because one, I felt really ashamed, right? There was a lot of shame, a lot of stigma, a lot of words being thrown at me like weak and soft and a bit, like all these things. And I wanted so much to be tougher like everybody else and not care and have the feelings and the experiences that I was. But at the very same time, being in that world taught me about competitiveness, taught me about don't quit, taught me about having heart and keeping going no matter how hard things are. And I think like that piece has carried me to this day through my life. And so again, as I reflected on all these things, which is why I was mentioning that in the beginning, that's what's really brought me here.
Well, I there's so much to unpack in what you've just said. Okay, so you're a certified mental performance coach. You also have a marketing company, right? So you're a writer and a storyteller, obviously. How do you bring that together? How do you bring in both of those worlds with your athletes, both from the mental performance side and also from the storytelling marketing side?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I think, honestly, I think they go hand in hand. So my first book, I have Athlete Mental Health Playbook, right? Like that was the one that broke a lot of doors. The second was Athlete Branding Blueprint, and it's about mindfully building your brand. And so I don't always bring those two worlds together, but when I do, inevitably marketing always becomes about mindset, right? So there are times that I help people, and it's funny that we're talking about this because I was just having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday that wants me to do more of this in their company, but about doing more of like coaching athletes around their marketing, and mindset again is inevitably going to come into your brand, because it's being able to tell who you are with confidence, with being transparent, with telling your story. And I love AI. I use AI. I use ChatGPT pretty much every day. But at the same time, those machines will never be able to tell your story the way that you are. It just hasn't lived it. It hasn't lived your experience. It hasn't felt your emotion. It hasn't walked in your shoes, hasn't learned your beliefs, hasn't had your family, hasn't had your social life. Like there's no way that can be duplicated. So I think from the branding standpoint, that you always kind of have to bring the mindset into how do I affect it? Like, how am I telling my story? Who really am I? Right. And how am I telling this? How can I get comfortable being vulnerable and having confidence around that? But also building and being the person that that's authentic to me. Right. Because sometimes I think we get stuck in building like these character versions of ourselves as our brand. And that's really dangerous when it's not aligned authentically with who we are, because that could be a train wreck. Right. So, and then of course on the other side, on the mental wellness side, um, when I approach first from that way, I think the branding kind of like becomes a part of it, because as you discover who you are
Yeah.
more of, right, and you gain against the confidence and you learn how to manage pressure and stress, you're sort of building your brand. And if you really think about it, Janet, we're all brands. Everybody's very public these days, whether you're on social media or not. Somebody's got their phone out somewhere,
Right.
taking pictures, taking video. And so you whether you purposely create one or not, you are a brand.
What are some of the misconceptions that you think people still have about mental health versus mental performance in sports?
I think we're doing a very good job with tackling mental wellness more. So, I try to find the intersection between performance and wellness, right? I think we're still trying to unpack what mental toughness really means. So, but I think that there's this element of resilience that you absolutely have to have, and that is incredible for your mental wellness. At the same time, you can't have true resilience without learning about yourself,
Right.
understanding how you operate, and not letting certain buttons be pushed, right? And rewiring certain negative thought habits and stuff like that. So that comes down to being able to again look at the picture, apply, do your mental conditioning. Like this, I talk so much about mental conditioning and mental reps and taking the time to reflect on these things. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to work. Oh, well, this has been working. I might as well just go about, my day-to-day life. And I think for coaches, sometimes they're not quite sure how to bring that into the program. Some coaches are bigger on building the mental toughness part. And sometimes that resonates with certain athletes, and with other athletes, it's not going to, right? You might have an athlete who's like, yeah, I'm not going to quit. You can't make me quit. And then you're going to have another athlete that's like, I can't do this anymore. And they quit the team. Like I've seen both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really about that intersection, is really about meeting people where they're at. And I think we could do a little bit of a better job of being intentional about that, of dedicating. I know everybody's super busy, but like dedicating time and resources to giving players and coaches and everybody a place where they can work on this mental side of things, and
Yeah.
then continue to work on towards their mental wellness. Of course, if there's a bigger issue now, we should get you to see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever the case may be for you. But I think it's something that needs to be really, really like my hope for the future, honestly, is that not now we have staff on every team and every organization, but sometimes they're spread really thin. So my hope is that it's more of part of the weekly curriculum, than not.
I hope so too. I think it's so important that you develop those skills for dealing with pressure and dealing with confidence and having a positive inner voice, and that's all part of it. And I don't think it's emphasized enough in sports, and we can go into all of that. So you often say that performance starts from within. So
Yes.
tell me what that means in practical terms for an athlete under pressure.
The easiest way that I can break this down
Yeah.
is, and I actually just did a workshop on this last week. I love doing this workshop, but I have something called the Prime Winning Mindset Method, right? So Prime is an acronym. I love my acronyms.
Hmm.
Prime stands for P is for presence, R is resilience, I is intention, M is motivated mental agility, and E is energy. So I think when you bring those things together, you can begin to understand. Again, this is why it's a part built awareness, education, mental conditioning, reps, all that, because you have like this inner game cycle, right? That you have to continue to work on it in order for it to work. So it's kind of like when you're preparing for a game, Janet, right? Like you're going to have like the athlete cycle, or even in our day, it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not, right? Your cycle is, I'm going to do my preparation for whatever it is I'm doing. I'm going to learn my plan. I'm going to do my training, whatever it is. I'm going to go apply it in the game, in the meeting, whatever it is, right? I'm going to make game time decisions. And then afterwards, I'm going to reflect and see, what did I do and what can I do good, and can I do better, right? And sort of like that's your inner game cycle, and that's how it affects your performance. If you're not able to put in the work ahead of time, right, and get comfortable being uncomfortable, seeing where you can improve, coming up with your game plan, but training that game plan for yourself through something like the Prime method, and then applying it, having real time, data and things coming through, and then afterwards, you look, okay, what did I do there? What can I do better? So that's sort of how I look at that cycle.
Yeah.
And it's a never ending cycle.
No, it's like training, it's like stretching, right? It's like it has to be part of what you do to be fit for your sport. I mean, I think it's
Right.
just as much a part of it is training. It's just training your brain to
It is. And
yeah.
so we look at this thing called neuroplasticity, right? So we know that our muscles, we know physically that we can train, we can tear the muscle fibers, do all this, come back. That's how we come back stronger, right? We rebuild in the amino acids and all those things, right? We know how that part works. I think that's really widely accepted. But with your brain, we don't really talk about that as much. So you have different regions of your brain, but also we all have these thought habits. We all have maybe unconscious beliefs that affect our nervous system. And that ultimately affects you physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it. That's why I talk about the eat and the Prime method. But we also have this thing called neuroplasticity. So this means that we are able to rewire our brain. So you can create new neural connections, right? So if you've always thought something has always triggered you, or you've always been low on confidence in a certain situation, or whatever it is, you can get in this conditioning. You can do the work to uncover what's really going on, let it go, reframe it, and build new mental muscle, basically. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not really mental muscle, but we'll call it that.
Yeah, we'll call it
Um,
that for this for this
We'll
purpose.
call it that for this. So you
Yeah.
can just create that rewiring in your brain. So the
Yeah.
same as you're creating the ability to grow your muscles and change the way that looks, you do it on the inside on your brain by rewiring your pathways through this conditioning.
Well, that's yeah, and I've just recently read also that, your brain doesn't know the difference between something that's really happening and something that you're visualizing. So how do you feel or how do you help athletes? Because I feel like a lot of times, in my experience, is that athletes are very tied to their performance in sport. They can almost not separate the athlete from the person, right? So their identity and their confidence is tied to their performance in the sport. How do you help athletes who feel like that sort of separate the identity of the person from their identity in the sport?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And essentially, if you really understand it, it's one and the same, right? Identity, in my newest book that just came out actually earlier this month, Mindset Champion, there's a whole chapter in here just on identity. Okay. So, but you have to understand that your identity can't be something that can be taken away from you, right? And it can't be dependent on something that can go away. Then you're going to run into trouble. But then you say, okay, but then who am I, right? So, for example, in this book and the chapter on it, we give you, because I have a co-author, we give you look, you have core personality traits, you have your inner world, you have self-expression, you have cultural environment, you have your relationship identity, you have lifestyle, intangibles, life experiences that shape you. And all these things are the things that make you, right? It's so much more than a label of, right? Like I'm so much more than a mindset coach and a marketing professional and mom and wife and all these things, right? I'm Misty in everything I've grown up with. I'm Misty in all my beliefs. I'm Misty in how I show up every day and serve like strangers, holding a door open, like how I choose to show up in the world. Like that's really my identity, right? So I think that's really important to sit and actually zoom out on the bigger pictures. And you're right, it can be a crisis. There's been studies that have been done that show you the more attached you are to your identity as an athlete, the more you're likely to suffer with that
Yeah.
post sports and in your
Right.
transition. So that's why we're working towards helping you get a bigger picture of yourself, in terms of who you really are, and then getting curious and figuring out, okay, what do I do with those other parts of myself? How else can I find fulfillment, outside of sports?
Well, I mean, and you touched on it, right? What you hear now from athletes who are, older and have retired, that the transition from going from athlete to, a normal everyday person is a very difficult one. And it's a positive thing to sort of develop those skills now, and letting kids find their identity outside of the sport as part of the sport. But again, like you said, zoom out and see that there's so much more to someone beyond that. I think that's going to help, as you said, in the transition after sports. So the earlier they can learn those skills, I think the better. Um, for parents listening, right? How can, and I'm a parent of two teenage athletes, and how can I ask open-ended questions that invite them to talk about stress or self-doubt without making them feel defensive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first thing I'm going to say about that is you have to just keep asking, because we often think that teens in particular, or even young adults, are not listening, and that's not true. They're listening, and there's a saying, a safe space is a consistent space. So whether they always are receptive to that space or not doesn't matter. You have to keep creating that space for them to feel safe
Yeah.
through consistency of continuing to check in on them. Now, here's a great way that we can do this, right? So we've been talking a lot about this. I'm on the board of a foundation called Kennedy Kids Foundation, and we've been talking about this a lot internally. But an easy way to ask somebody, kind of check in how they're doing without making them have to express big feelings necessarily, but it might open the gate for that. You just ask them very simply, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how are you feeling today? What number are you? And then it gives, okay, I'm a 5. Okay, that's interesting. You want to, tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about that.
Right. Why are you a 5
Maybe they
today?
will, maybe they won't. But
Yeah.
then at least like if there's like a few days in a row where they're at a 4, right? Like, okay, like kind of tell me what's going on there. And you can, and I think too, parents, like, express how you feel. Be like, okay, this is my number today. This is what's going on in my world. Because then they begin to understand again that, that you're also human, and
Yeah.
that it gives them permission to speak about these things as well. But I think don't be worried about if they give you like the great big story, or they just give you something small. Just, I think the big thing would just be creating those safe spaces. So, and the number thing doesn't respond to them. Another question that I personally like to use, all right, if you were an emoji, which one would you be? Like sometimes people respond better to that, especially younger kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think, like, instead of saying like, what's your feeling today, not everyone's great at expressing their feelings, or they're
Yeah.
not comfortable with it, so give them another way.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to be instituting that this evening. I can't wait till they till they get home. Okay, so we're gonna talk about overcoming pressure, and I think a lot of athletes and people. I shouldn't reserve this to athletes. We have a problem with perfectionism, right? And trying to be perfect. And in today's era with social media, people and athletes specifically are constantly judged instantly, right? By fans, by brands, by coaches, by teammates. What are some practical tips for protecting your peace and your confidence in this very unique time that we're living in?
So in terms of like protecting your peace and your confidence while using social media, or just in general?
Well, maybe I think in general, because social media is obviously a part of it, but I think, moving away from social media and just in your life, right?
Yeah. So I think I'm glad you brought this up. So this is something that I think is really important, and that is to control the controllables. We use this term all the time in sports, right? And what does that basically mean, right? We say that to control what you can control, do what you can do, that kind of thing, right? But what happens when you can't control everything else around you, right? What you can control is being the calm in that chaos.
Yeah.
You can control not letting what someone else posts or says or does take you down like a rabbit hole, right? Like, it doesn't mean to be emotionless, and it doesn't mean things are not going to bother you and someone's not going to say something that hurts, or that you're not going to have disappointment or face pressure. It doesn't mean that. But what it means is learning to regroup and decide. Again, you have to take time and be really conscious and really, really, I'm so big on mindfulness. You have to be mindful in the moment of what's going on to be able to say, like, okay, that's actually not even mine. Let me let that go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how do you what are your tips for teaching that mindfulness to young adults? Is it, I know you have your mental health playbook. Is it kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, sort of doing these like exercises, doing through repetition? Is that how you build the mindfulness to sort of, in that moment when you're feeling something, be able to say, okay, hey, this is something I practiced. I'm able to recall how I work through this.
Yeah. So that, yes. So we're talking about a couple different things here,
Yeah.
right? So we talked about the mental conditioning. That's that recall. That's that the neural pathway development and neuroplasticity and all that, right? Like, that's putting in the work and the training and the reps, which I'll give you a tip for how to do that in a second. And then the mindfulness is learning how to just show up and be present, basically without judgment. So a lot of times what happens is when we think mindfulness is, oh, just be present in the now. But there's a specific way, particularly in the practice and in the study of mindfulness, there are lots of components that actually go into it. So there's a way to be mindful of, at the very basis is, yes, be aware. Right now, I'm not past, I'm not present, but also not judging. It's not good, it's not bad. I'm just here. Trevor Moawad, you know, God rest his soul, would talk about getting into neutral. And so I think, like, those are keys to noticing that. But then when you get there, now you have to decide what you're going to do with that, take your next best step. So yes, I have all kinds of tips and tricks that I teach people to create. I have something called the FAST method. I have some other stuff that I teach, but I also have an app that I released a couple months ago. It's pretty new still, that you go in there every day. It's totally free, and it's called Zen Leads, and you go in there every day and you're going to create your intention for the day. So what's my intention for today? How do I want to show up? What do I want to achieve? Right? For me today, for example, mine is focused on the W's. Okay, right? Because we're really wired to focus on the negative things and the losses, right? So focus on the W's is my intention today. And then my affirmation of the day, 3 things I'm grateful for. There's a mood tracker, so I can kind of track my mood and see how that's been trending. And then there's a specific mental conditioning exercise in there every single day that takes less than 5 minutes to help you begin to create that, so that when you're in the moment and you're being mindful, you can recall, like, okay, this is how I want to handle this.
I love that. What is the name of the app again?
It's called Zenleets.
Okay.
So Zenletes. So it's actually a web-based app. You're not going to find it on the Apple Store,
Okay.
Google Store, anything like that. You have to go to zenleets.com, get it, and add it to your home screen on your device.
Got it.
But yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I love that. Now, what are some of the red flags that you think that parents or coaches can look out for, before burnout happens for a young person?
Yeah. So burnout's a little tricky because there's different parts. You can burn out physically, you can burn out mentally, you can burn out emotionally. Like, there's different pieces to burnout. But I think definitely if somebody's not showing up with the same energy that they normally do, if they're not displaying the same attitude, if they're withdrawing more, they're getting frustrated a lot more easily. If they're just, not in the flow and performing as strong as they are, like something seems like off, like that's a signal they might be burnt out. So I think it's just really just kind of like, again, this is why it goes back to meeting people where they are, with what we were talking about earlier, and which is sometimes difficult when you have a big roster, but kind of being aware of where people are and like, huh, it's been a few days now, they're not really showing up the same way, or they're snapping, or they look really lethargic, or um they're having these outbursts that they don't normally have. So those are some red flags for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that, that I love about what you're doing is that you're sort of reframing this conversation about mental health and mental performance as not being like fixing a problem, because I think the misconception is that when we talk about mental health or mental performance, people tend to think that there's something wrong with them, right? Oh, there's a mental health issue, there's a mental performance issue, you're fixing something. When actually it's not that we're fixing anything. It's that you're building tools and muscles to help you perform better, right? Just like weight training or running or whatever. So I love that the consistent theme in what you're bringing is that this is not fixing there's nothing wrong with anyone. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just mental performance. Would you agree in the way that I'm characterizing
Yeah,
it?
I mean, it may not feel that way. I mean,
Yeah.
you may feel when you're going
Yeah.
when you're going through a mental wellness issue, beyond just like I'm having a stressful day, but if you're having like more of an issue, um, you may feel like, okay, yeah, there's definitely something wrong with me. So
Right.
I don't want to discredit and say like there's nothing wrong with you, just train your
Yeah.
mind better. Like I would never, ever, ever say that. But um, but I think that we do need to normalize and find our perspective, and we can shift that, right? So maybe I don't feel great right now and kind of there is something going wrong. Good. I'm glad that you noticed that. Now, what can we do to work past that? Judging yourself and having shame and hiding it is not going to be the answer, because eventually it's going to come out in
Yeah.
other ways and it's going to affect you in other ways. So, how do we look at something differently? So, for example, you can reframe resilience, right? It's like, oh, I got to be resilient. It makes you feel like some people it make them feel great, and some people might be tired. I'm tired of being resilient, right?
Right.
Like I'm just tired. And okay, so is there another way as we work through this? Is there another way that you can reframe that? So, for example, when I'm going through a particularly tough period, I might have to remind myself I'm in the middle of my comeback story, right? And that feels better than judging myself and saying, what's wrong with me? Why am I here again? Why am I so dumb? How come I'm making all these bad decisions? How can I possibly be back in this place? Or I thought I was past that. Or how did I get here? Why did I make those bad choices? All these negative things that we say to ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to mindfulness.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I need to activate my inner coach, not my inner critic right now.
Yeah.
So I don't feel great. I'm going to honor that, but I'm also going to decide to do something about that.
Well, is that okay? So I read about your 2-minute timeout. Tell me a little bit about that and what that means.
That one, there's so many different tools.
Yeah.
That one, you can give yourself basically, let's say something's going on, right? And you need to process it. That's sort of setting a time limit for allowing yourself to process what's going on, right? Okay, so I'm going to allow myself to sit with this, be mad about this, be sad about this, whatever, feel sorry for myself for 2 minutes or whatever it is. And then, like you might have like a penalty in hockey, for example. I heard this is how I got this idea. I heard another coach talking about this, and I wish I remembered her name, and I don't. But I thought it was brilliant. So okay, you go in the penalty box. You have that 2 minutes. You have whatever the time to do whatever you're going to do with that information. But then when that's over, now you need to allow yourself to start to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Give yourself some time to feel it and then move past it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you called it earlier on. We are going to talk about NIL, and I want to talk about the mental game of NIL and personal branding, because with NIL, I think there's been an added layer of stress for athletes and their families, right? In terms of expectations and comparisons and constant content creation. What mindset shifts do you think are necessary for athletes in how they approach NIL deals as opportunities rather than as a source for anxiety?
I think it depends on each individual person, right? Now, I will say that I know athletes that they don't care if they have NIL deals or not. Like,
Yeah, I know
like
a lot
that's
of those actually.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't think it's like like a necessarily a blanket thing. But however, if that is something that you're going after, what I can tell you is that you have to learn how to show up in a way that's going to work for you. And you have to decide, like, is the work that's going to go into getting these NIL deals and then fulfilling those NIL deals actually what you want?
right.
Or are you just chasing the ability to say, I have an NIL deal? Like, where's your motivation there?
So true.
Right.
Yeah. From your perspective, how can parents support their kids as if they are into getting these deals and want to make that part of their story? How can parents support their kids emotionally as they navigate these pressures and the public attention?
Again, having the conversation about having that safe space, making that safe place at home, whether there's an NIL deal or not, that the child feels or the student feels supported, at least at home, right? No matter what's happening elsewhere in the world, at home, I want to feel supported. Now, when you put yourself out there as a brand, you are probably going to have critics, right? So now you need to approach that conversation. That's just one piece of this puzzle. But how do I approach that? Well, do you do you focus on just that, or do you go back to, no, I'm going to focus on the wins? So again, it comes back to perspective, right? So there was this really great quote that I saw Mark Manson posted. I'm going to say it more politely than he wrote it because he uses the F word a lot, which I love, but I'm not going to say on this show.
We are
He
free to
says,
curse.
okay, well, he said, I'm not sure what ages you'd be listening to this.
Yeah.
He says, if you wouldn't ask for their advice, then fuck their courtesy.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wow, like
That
that's
simplifies
so good.
it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Right? Because like these internet trolls, if you're not going to ask them for life advice and they really don't matter to you, then who cares if they're critics of you or not?
Oh, yeah.
Another saying that I love is no one has ever erected a statue of a critic.
That that is hilarious and very true also, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
So
the
you
same
have to sort of
yeah,
like,
go ahead.
you have to think about these things, right? As a parent, as whoever, like, even as an adult in your day-to-day life,
Right.
like you have to keep these things like in mind. And I think this is why I was talking about authenticity with building your brand. I think when you do things with authenticity and you're not just doing it to fulfill a brand character, you're doing it because it's who you are and it's aligned with who you are and it feels fulfilling. That's way different.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I love those quotes. The earlier you learn those things, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Let's shift gears to developing this sort of like purpose-driven, authentic brands, right? So I know that you have a marketing company. Tell me the name of the marketing agency that you have.
So that agency is called Miss Inc. MISS. Second word is Inc. INK.
Okay. So you help athletes obviously find clarity in who they are, right?
Right.
Which is a key in branding. How do you
Yes.
help them translate those personal values into a public image?
Well, it's just that. Like, let's look at what are your values, right? Like at my marketing agency, we talk a lot about mindfulness, authenticity, like all these things, because those are super important to me. And that's easy for me to align with as the face of that company because that's how I live my day-to-day life, right? So I think that's first important is understanding absolutely what are your values and who are you? Because again, if this brand that you're creating or that you envision does not align with those values, you're setting yourself up for failure. At least internally, you're going to feel like you're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about for athletes that might be like naturally introverted or might not be into social media, but they're still interested in building a brand? Is that even possible?
That is possible. You have to go about it a different way. You have to find ways that work for you. However, I think it's important also to understand sometimes you have to, what I was saying earlier, get comfortable being uncomfortable and be willing to push yourself past your limits. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I am an introvert, like introvert, extrovert. Like
Yeah.
if I'm in front of people, I can be on, but I'm pretty introverted. But I was never good at public speaking. I did not like doing it. Every class I ever took in high school and college, I mean, I was at the podium shaking. My voice was shaking. My body was shaking. I hated it. Tons of anxiety. I didn't have a big fear of it, but I didn't like it. I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't feel like I was good at it. But when I told you I started my company at 26, I was like, all right, I have to get over that. If I want to do well as a business owner, I'm going to have to figure that shit out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to push myself past this, because how am I going to sell and how am I going to present my company in front of rooms of people if I can't speak? And so I joined an organization that you had to speak stand up in front of the room and speak every week. Like I put myself in these situations where I made myself become comfortable with these things, and now I get paid to speak. Right. So, I think that's something to think about. If you're really, really resistant to putting yourself out there, but you want a public brand, we have to think about one, like where can we grow? Right? Like really think about your goal and who you have to be. And then who do we have to, so then, all right, what do we need to match up from who you are now to who you need to be to reach that goal? But then how do we do it in a way that feels good to you?
Yeah. Right.
So that you feel like, okay, I can build my brand and we can get creative and kind of do some other things. But I think you're going to have to, if that's the situation that you're in, I think you're going to have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable putting yourself out there and just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What is a simple way or a simple exercise that athletes or, young people can identify what their passions are? Sometimes people don't know what they're into, right? Because they're young and they do a particular thing. How do you help them sort of identify what their personal values are?
Yeah. So we're talking about values or their interests?
Well, values, interests, I mean, it's something that they're going to market as part of their brand.
So interest is pretty easy. I mean, honestly, it's more of like just paying attention to the things that interest you. So when you're like, oh, that's interesting, I want to learn more about that. Okay, make a note of that.
Yeah.
Because why is that of interest to you, right? Like, don't be afraid to get curious, right? That's why the M is motivated mental agility in the mindset method, because you've got to be able to keep looking and seeing, like staying curious, staying coachable, staying, where you're just kind of like paying attention to things and not being so single-minded. Now, for athletes, that can be difficult because you have to be very, very focused in order to excel and continue. Like that has to be your thing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean like you can't make a note of, hey, that's kind of interesting to me. Or I really like the content of that book, that story was interesting to me. Or I'm really interested in this subject, right? Like just sort of pay attention to those things. Or when you even think about when you were a little kid, who did you like to pretend to be? Like I think sometimes there are some clues there. So just again, like looking at the totality of who you are and your interests, and then your values. I mean, there's all kinds of exercises and things that you can do to help you narrow down what those are, because most of us have like a very long list, and then you can kind of narrow it down. There's an exercise in the Mindset Champion book about that as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, but it's again like what interests you and what's important to you.
Yeah. Now let's talk about performance recovery, because athletes oftentimes, suffer an injury or a setback. How do you help them process the loss of control that comes with, having to sit on the sidelines or having to, do some rehab or, things that come along with injuries and setbacks?
Yeah. So again, it comes down to finding your sense of steadiness, like really finding that warrior, that no quit within you during those times of resilience. Remember, it's your comeback. You're in the middle of your comeback story.
Yeah.
So thinking of it like that, and then, okay, what can I do right now? Or is there a different team activity that I can participate in? Because sometimes injuries are actually really isolating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, do I join like a peer group for other athletes who are injured or were injured? Do I find a mentor? It could be a teammate, it could be a coach, but somebody who understands that experience, that's willing to kind of like buddy up and mentor you on that and finding your support system, right? So I think it's about creating that environment where you're not losing, where you feel like you're not losing yourself, right? Because you're not physically active, you're doing other things. I know a friend of mine, she's a professional MMA fighter, and while she was dealing with an injury last year, she decided, okay, I'm going to use this time while this is rehabbing and I'm doing my best training and all that. I'm going to use this time to actually work on my mindset, because I know I have a confidence issue there and I have some like other stuff going on there when I step into the ring. So I'm going to use this time to work through that. And that's what she did. So she found like purpose and in a different way to train herself while she was rehabbing.
Right. It's still improving your performance, even though you're not
Yes.
doing that on the field or on the court
Yeah.
because of a setback. Yeah, that's huge. Now let's talk about performance in the middle of a game, right? Do you have any tips or tricks to help athletes in between games or during a game to help them again reset and gain that confidence back when things might not be going their way?
Right. So we talk about this as this next play mentality, right? So I have lots of tips about that actually on my blog, on my site. But again, that goes back to mental conditioning. Like you have to decide, like that's the mindset that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And then you have to practice it over and over and over again. Because some games you might do really well with on next one mentality, and some games you might not do well with next play mentality. And then that's why you got to go through that cycle. Okay, let me review what happened. Is there a pattern when things that's making it harder for me to get back into next play mentality? Is there a pattern when things go well that I get into next play mentality, right? So observing that and knowing that, but getting in the condition and getting in the reps. So I know athletes who will say an affirmation. I know athletes that have done it enough times that they can just literally just shake it off and say on to the next one. There's acronyms like I have reset, refocus, restart. There's another one that Lou Holtz came up with, win. What's important now brings you back to the present. Let me refocus. There's methods like, I'm really a big fan of breathing. So if you're feeling like super emotional and you're having a hard time, like just taking a deep breath and allowing yourself to just kind of like, just for a second, like you don't always have a lot of time, but just for a second.
Yeah.
I know other athletes, they've trained that when they clap, like that snaps them back into where they are and what they need to do. Snap a wristband. It really depends on you, but that's why you have to put in the work. You have to get curious and see what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
And then get in the reps of doing that over and over and over again, and it'll become easier.
What is something that you would give them as a mental warm up? Something that helps them train with focus and confidence before the whistle blows.
So like it's just like in a pregame talk,
Yeah.
you mean, or just like ongoing training?
I would say like something that they could do, an exercise that they could do before they get out there on the field.
Yeah. Again, this is going to become your pregame routine is so individualized.
Okay.
For somebody, what helps them lock in might be listening to a song. I know athletes that walk barefoot in the grass and they reconnect away. They love doing that. There's athletes like George Kittle. He talks about before a game, he'll breathe in and breathe out, but each one is an affirmation. So like breathe in confidence, breathe out doubt, right? And he kind of goes through his cycle of that before the game. I wish I had like a blanket thing that would work for everybody, but I think it's really about finding what works for you, but definitely getting yourself in a place where you can feel like you are locked in and you are focused. And I will say too, Janet, that sometimes a lot of players get pre-performance anxiety. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty common. So there's a few ways to look at this. Sometimes that anxiety, and I'm saying this because I'm thinking of football players I've worked with, sometimes that anxiety is just a signal that it's adrenaline and you're ready to perform. But we always think of anxiety as bad.
Right.
But maybe it's not bad. Maybe it's just your body's getting ready and that's what you're going through to get to where you want to go. So you need to sort of just embrace that a little bit more as sort of like, this is your body preparing you to compete. For others, it may actually be like anxiety, like the like a disruptive emotion that's going to get in the way of their performance, right? So what do? You have to sit there and acknowledge, okay, there's anxiety here, and just breathe and kind of just let it go. But you have to acknowledge it, let it sit there. Don't judge it. Don't judge yourself for having it, and just let it sit there and let it go. Let it sit there and let it go. I did a talk over the summer of the Florida High School Athletic Association with some student leaders. And one of them was an athlete. He was talking about that's what he does with his pregame anxiety. He had to learn. And I think it was after he came back after an injury. This started actually. So he had to learn to sit there like, okay, if I just sit there and I just allow it to be, and within a few minutes, it just gets like less and less and less and less and less.
Yeah. Yeah. Just acknowledging it sometimes is part of getting over it, right? Is just letting it happen and not, like you said, not judging it. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for this conversation. You have reminded us through all of the things that you're doing that the strongest athletes aren't the ones who just know how to take care of their bodies, but also their minds and their performance. So I would love to hear from you. Where can listeners connect with you? Where can they learn more about Purposeful Athletics, about your marketing company? Tell me your socials and your websites and all of that stuff.
All the things. So purposesoulathletics.com.
Okay.
So purpose, the word soul, and then the word athletics, plural.com. That's where, all my mindset stuff, resources, books, everything is there. And then the Miss Inc., my branding company is miss-ink.com. You can check that out if that's of interest to you. But either way, you can always reach me personally on social media. I am at the Misty Buck on pretty much every social media site. That's my handle. So you can find me there as well. And actually, if you wanted to just text me too, you can do that. 786-505-1797.
Amazing. Well, before we go, I want to ask one final question. Today, are you feeling more babes, balls, or brands, and why?
I would say
maybe I should have asked.
I would say balls, because I got some stuff I got to do today that I'm not really looking forward to, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You're going to do it. You're going to push through. Well, thank you so much for being with us. This was a great conversation, and one I hope we can continue. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you for hanging with me on Babes, Balls, and Brands. Keep grinding and protecting your brand because your story matters and it's just getting started. Stay focused, stay fierce, and remember to always bet on yourself. Till next time.